Hey, welcome to Whitecap, the Canadian Sailing Podcast. I'm Dave Krypton, longtime dinghy sailor and passionate fan of Canadian sailing. Since year one of the podcast, I've been presenting the Whitecap Cup as an award to sailing programs that serve the outsiders of our sailing communities, those without access to the sport we love, or simply a program that doesn't fit nicely into our regular yacht club structure. Previous winners were the Broader Reach program in Armdale, Sask Sailing, and the Broad Reach program in Toronto. This year, I'm pleased to present the Whitecap Cup for Greatness in Alternative Sailing Programs to the Nova Scotia Mobile Sailing School. The Nova Scotia Mobile Sailing School offers communities across Nova Scotia the opportunity to introduce sailing to places and people that don't have their own Learn to Sail programs. Here to accept the award are Executive Director of Sail Nova Scotia, Frank Denis, and Sophia Josenhans, Technical Director of Sail Nova Scotia. Congratulations, you guys.
Thanks very much.
Quite an honor. We can now call ourselves an award-winning mobile sailing school program.
Absolutely, and it will eventually come with a handmade ceramic cup that you can proudly display in your offices.
Very nice.
But yeah, thanks for coming
Very
on.
Nice.
So if you were to just give me, Sophia, maybe a real quick rundown of what the sailing school, mobile sailing school is, and what you're trying to achieve with it.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a long-running program here in Nova Scotia, and it was just reintroduced following COVID recently. And since then, our goal has been to take this program where Sail Nova Scotia provides all of the equipment in our trailer, and we hire our own instructors. And then through an application process, we select different communities across the province who aren't able to host their own Learn to Sail programs. And all summer long, this trailer visits community after community, providing all the knowledge and equipment we need to share our sport.
Awesome. And Frank, what's the kind of long-term? Sophia's saying it just kind of started up again. What's the long-term history? What's the history of mobile sailing school in Nova Scotia?
It has quite an animated history, quite an interesting history. When I started back in 2002, it had been dormant for a few years. The reason being just the whole cost of running the mobile, particularly when it comes to having a vehicle and operating a vehicle. The instructors would get down to Digby, let's say, and call and say the transmission is acting up, but they needed to be in Cape Breton on Monday morning. What do we do? And it was just getting too costly. The other interesting thing is it was, according to legend, it was sponsored by a brewery. And what would happen is every Friday afternoon or every Sunday afternoon before they headed out on the road, they would drop by the brewery and put as much extra beer in there as they could for the two instructors. So that's kind of a fun. That would have been back in the early 90s, late 80s, way back.
Right.
Then.
Well, way back. Well, I was just going to say that in the 80s, I don't know if you remember Rothman's, the cigarette company, used to sponsor all the regattas, and all the marks were like these big kind of floating cigarettes things. So certainly the advertising world has changed. But yeah, so you were saying something else.
They have, and looking back at a lot of the pictures from those times, which are lots of fun, many of the instructors, are guys and they don't have their shirts on and they're running around. It was a different time. But when we looked at that, we started to get resurrected about 2008, 2009. We thought, how can we impact and encourage communities to develop sailing programs? Because that's one of the big challenges that the province and Sport Nova Scotia put on us for funding, and it's the right thing to do. So we developed a plan. We launched in 2010 again, but we used a different model. So what we did was we said to the host communities that if you want this program, you're responsible for trailering it to your community from the last known community. That way we weren't on the hook for transmissions or tailpipes that fall off and those sorts of things. So it all came from the host communities. So we were just responsible for renting a car, which is what we were doing. So a good conditioned car and getting the two instructors there. So that's what we've been doing for the last number of years, and it's worked very, very well. We got a lot of advice and support from other mobile sailing schools from across Canada, so BC and Ontario and Manitoba ran them, and so we came up with a model that worked. And one of the big aha moments was, why are we hauling these boats get the host community. It's, as you know, in Nova Scotia, each community, we try and stagger them to, they're only an hour's drive from each other, so it's a quick drive to pick up the trailer, and so far so good.
That's a
Yeah.
really
Our
smart
host
idea
communities,
that you just
sorry.
wouldn't come to you immediately like, oh, well, I wouldn't ask if I was bringing sailors to a regatta. You wouldn't ask the host club to bring your sailors, but
That's
this
right.
idea is really, it's like right in front of your face. What were you going to say,
It is.
Sophia?
I was just going to highlight how amazing all of our host communities are. They do a ton to establish the program at home, which includes their own registration and outreach within the community. They help find housing for the instructors and they help transport the equipment as well. So they really deserve lots of congratulations as well. They work really hard.
Absolutely, and that's actually where I wanted to go next with you, Sophia. Can you tell me the communities? You only go to like 6 or 7, right? You're only able to in the summer.
Yeah, we're limited. We've got 8 weeks of summer sailing season, and we try to visit as many communities as we can. Um, Historically, we've been visiting quite a few communities up in Cape Breton. Recently, we visited communities like Dobson and St. Peter's. Um, and as well a couple communities along the North Shore of Nova Scotia. We've got 4 wonderful communities there, and on occasion we'll visit other communities like Ketch Harbor. And we get interest from all over the province each year. We just try to make sure we, as Frank mentioned, find a schedule that means that transporting that equipment doesn't put too much pressure on our host communities.
And what were the places that were like kind of more challenging to actually run a program out of?
Great question. Some of the places where our trailer goes is already a well-established yacht club that has, a ramp and a marina and a building where our coaches can use to teach lessons. And some of them, the trailer is really just pulled up by an old ramp that hasn't been used in 10 years besides someone just to launch their boat to go fishing. So sometimes we'll be in a community where the trailer itself becomes the classroom for some of our students. So that's another thing that's very unique about the program is every week your environment is so different.
Where was it like that? Where you the one where you it was just a board to, like, what were the small, like, was that Antigonish? That's what I'm thinking when you said that, or where was it really
Antigonish is
hard?
a little smaller. We've also got St. Peter's is quite small, and Grand Narrows in particular as well.
Okay, I mean that's so
Yeah, the
exciting. Go ahead, Frank.
with Antigonish, they're a great group up there who lead it, and we've been going there for year after year. There's no power in their little clubhouse. There's a portable washroom, but the dock is okay. But the
Mhm.
big problem up there is poison ivy, and so we've got some challenges with the marshaling the kids. Don't go there, don't go there. Stay here, stay
Right,
here. So,
right.
but it's a wonderful community, and it's introduced, I'm going to say, at least 100 kids to sailing up in that area over the
I mean,
last number of
that's very
years.
exciting, that those parts where you're going somewhere where people don't necessarily sail, or when I had the sail people on, and they went to a lake in a Indian reservation where they people had never seen a sailboat before. It's so exciting. But then you do have some places that have had historic history of programs like Pictou. I imagine, maybe Frank, you can speak to that. Places that have dead sailing programs and you're trying to rebuild them.
Exactly. So Picto's a good one. They've got a wonderful club up there that races and cruises regularly, based out of the Pictou Marina. But they're keen to get youth on the water and in boats, and so we've been going there for the last number of years. Only recently have we started working with the Pictou Yacht Club. In the past, we were working with the Pictou Recreation Department. So the Pictou Yacht Club has a vision to one day get kids back on the water up there, because they see the benefit not only from a club sustainability point of view, but from a whole recreation point of view. Many of these clubs we go to, yes, they don't have a sailing program, but many don't have are limited by the recreation programs that they can offer kids in the summertime. And they don't have basketball courts or hockey rinks or things that are operating, so it's very limited, and the kids love it, and it's a new activity, it's a new sport, and usually the registration fills up very, very quickly.
And Sophia, what kind of boats are you guys using for this?
Currently, we're using some laser picos. We chose these boats because they're nice and bright and colorful, which the kids who are new to the sport find very fun to see out on the water. And they're also really simple to set up and to rig and to learn to sail in. I think in the past, the program had used things like opties, which were a little constricting for some of the sailors, especially some of them as they get a little older. So it gives them a little more freedom to play around. And those hulls are so durable, which is really helpful for this program too.
I think that's great. Like, is that the case? Are the other mobile school, like I know BC does one in Opties. Are there other places that use this kind of boat, or are they all doing Opties, the mobile sailing schools across the country?
I
There's
yeah, good
Sure. I know
question.
I know there's a few Opti, and I know Sask Sailing runs their program mobily as well. So they use all kinds of things. I even know they have some lasers that they use.
Okay,
Um,
okay.
but I'm not sure if anyone else has a Pico. I know some of the FIVAs and things like that are pretty popular too.
Yeah,
The
that's
other
what I was gonna
benefit of
say. I've
the
dropped a
laser
FIVA
pico,
from like 5 feet high and nothing happens to them. So something
They
like that
basically
is,
bounce.
yeah, yeah. Go ahead, Frank.
yeah, I was going to say the laser picos are bomb proof compared to the opties that need the gel coating done and the bumps like on the rocks. So, and also you can fit two, sometimes three kids comfortably, and an adult and a child on a laser pico compared to an opti. And a lot of the programs get kids towards the end of the program to take their mom or dad out for a sail.
Oh, that's
So
great.
having them comfortable in the boat and showing them what they can learn, and so it's great that way.
Yeah, you can
Right.
also rig it to be single-handed or double-handed, depending on whether or not you want to put up the jib. So it's nice because it provides so many different options for your sailors and how many and how old.
Right. And are all the programs the same size, or do some places have bigger communities or bigger number of sailors?
Yeah, there's definitely some communities that have like huge amounts of interest, and more than anything, they're limited by how many we can take on. We recommend usually to cap the program around 10 sailors, but if it's a group of all sailors that are a little younger and smaller, we can maybe adjust to more. But there are some communities who they could probably have 10 different sailors and still fill the program for 3 weeks straight.
Right, right. Do the communities like is there outreach to people who have lower accessibility to sailing in any of the programs, or is it just kind of whatever kids find out about it?
I know some of our communities do that sort of outreach, and sometimes families will sponsor other sailors to participate. But that is something that is ultimately a decision for our community host.
Right. Actually, just go back to the Picto thing. That was where I went. I had my very first regatta of my life when I was. I still got the trophies up here. Um, we
Amazing.
sailed cadets out there, and it was a vibrant community. This is like early '80s in 1982. They sailed. They had. Do you guys know this boat, the Cadet International Cadet?
I've heard of it. I don't
Yeah,
know the boat at
it's
all.
a like a two-person. They still race them in like it's one of the junior classes at the Australian Youth National Championships still. But anyway, they had billets. There was a big marina with a lot of boats, and it was a really like a vibrant sailing community. And I think probably you're saying that they could resurrect that in Pictou. Is Tatamagouche another place you guys go?
Yep.
And did they ever? Is there a
Tatamagouche,
history of sailing out there, like of youth sailing?
not so much. Tatamagouche Yacht Club is based out of the Sunrise Marina, so they have a small gazebo on top of a little hill. It's absolutely beautiful spot, and they've got a marina with I'm going to say 10, 15 sailboats and a bunch of power boats that mostly go out into the Northumberland Strait and over to PEI because that's relatively close and along the coast there. So
Hmm.
Tatamagouche is one that's really got a goal to develop a full-time program. So we're working with them. Takes a while, as it always does, to get the funds and to get the equipment and get the support. And then Pugwash as well, which is just down the coast a little ways.
Right,
We're all
right. I mean,
Yeah.
so
just like we're talking about the Rockies of sailing venues, like the, just incredible venues and play, but with no infrastructure, but like places you would want to be sailing, right? So it's just we are so
places
lucky in the
you
Maritimes. But go ahead.
places you would be wanting to sail, but also people very, very passionate about the sport and sharing their paths, getting kids involved, and it's amazing to see and to support these fantastic volunteers right across the province who it's a lot of work. I mean, as Sophia said, we don't do anything with the registration. They've got to pick up the boats. They've got to do all that. We show up, one-stop shop, and off they go. But it's really, really up to them. They're the real heart and soul of the program. It's the community champions, we call them.
Right. Where do you see these programs like failing? Because I know some provinces haven't been able to keep them going. Sophia, like where do you think, how come you guys have been able to succeed when some other provinces haven't been able to keep their programs going?
I mean, I think the strength of our communities is certainly part of it. There's no doubt about that. They work very hard and they're very supportive of all of the bumps that inherently come along with this process. So they're always willing to help out by fixing a boat at 4 p.m. on a Friday before it goes back in the trailer or things like that. But some of the challenges that we see all the time is it is very draining to make sure all the equipment stays up to date because when you are in these isolated communities, you're not exactly very close to the yacht shop. So it can be a little bit
Right,
challenging
right,
there, keeping everything up and running. So we try to give as many spare parts as we can to the coaches before we send them off.
right.
And a general issue we have in Nova Scotia is there are like nearly every program I work with wants more staff, ours included. So sometimes it can be challenging for us to find instructors, especially for the mobile format where not everybody wants to be away from home all summer.
Yeah, yeah. I can imagine that.
It On that, David, because many of these kids are first time to the sport. We want to make sure it's a quality sport experience for them by having good equipment that works, that looks good, that's colorful, that they want to go out and sail in. And this past year, we had some challenges with equipment that got damaged that we couldn't
Mm-hmm.
repair. So that sort of impacted our program a little bit. But, working with Sophia and the others, we're making sure that the boats are all up to snuff come 2025 sailing season.
Right.
Yeah, we
Do you,
encounter all kinds of unique problems. There's a certain part on a laser pico you just can't buy anymore. And one of our host community people, I think is Rob's down over in Pugwash, he ended up making a whole new part, roto molded out of plastic and
oh,
shipped it off
nice.
to Tatamagouche down the road. And like things like that are what really help keep the program alive because we find some weird problem solving strategies out in the woods.
Right, right. That's definitely a strategy for the, people live far flung areas like PEI and Newfoundland, just, trying to fashion something out of a stick you found in a ditch somewhere. Do you have any future goals for the mobile sailing school?
One of the things we're exploring is adding some foiling to the mobile sailing school, foiling boat. Now, we could only do that with somebody who's trained and knows how to operate a foiling boat because many of our 16, 17-year-old instructors won't have that knowledge. So we've reached out to Weekend Foil with a good friend of all of ours, Og Ferrario, to see if he could maybe go up and for 1 week up in Pictou or in Pugwash and have a WASP there along with the laser picos, and they all work together and they go out sailing and get the experience and the joy of foiling. So there is that. There's another one of, some communities would like the equipment longer, so we're looking at 2-week intervals rather than 1 week to week. And then the other one that's a great potential is weekends and evenings in the shoulder season. So for
Mm-hmm.
May and June, and then September, October, which is some of the best sailing months. So to go to whether it be a provincial park or a community or a lake or somewhere and just set up and run these programs and introduce Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, Boys and Girls Club, anybody and everyone who wants to come out and try sailing.
Right. Well, that's to kind of piggyback off that, like, do we have any idea, since we're talking about these kind of accessibility issues that, and, like I say, in Armdale, they do such a great job with that Prada Reach program. And like any other thoughts about increasing accessibility to sailing for people or to racing for people already sailing? Like what kind of thoughts percolate in your minds? I know I'm just throwing this on you helter-skelter here, but yeah, what kind of increasing accessibility to this sport, either to racing for people who are sailors or people that are not sailors, are able to get out on a boat for the first time?
That's a great question. I guess in the context of the mobile school, something that I've been communicating with some of our host communities is the ones who are nearby is maybe sharing some resources that they have for the neighboring communities, and then maybe bringing some of those sailors together so that they can experience sailing at a new venue or maybe even racing with each other. And as well, just sharing the general resources of if someone is able to buy a coach boat and then another club is able to buy a few boats, then they could share and help get a little momentum there. Um,
Right.
but that's a tough question, especially in the context of mobile, where you're asking me things I don't know the answer to yet. I'm gonna have to think on
Yeah,
it.
yeah, no, just to kind of throw it out. Frank, you must have some thoughts on
Yeah,
accessibility. I mean,
one
you
of the,
just talked a
we
bit,
talk,
but go ahead.
yeah, we talk about, getting kids involved in sailing, but this program is also introduces kids to water safety. As you know, Nova Scotia has a problem. I think most provinces across Canada do with young people drowning, and they just don't have the knowledge. They don't understand, the cold water. That jumping in the water in June in the ocean, it's be hypothermic, and so part of our program teaches a lot about water safety for these communities, so they can whether they continue on sailing or not. We hope they do, but they'll have a good knowledge of how to safely jump in the water, swim with a buddy, what to look for on the bottom, make them less scared of the rocking of the boat and the waves and those sorts of things, and what to do when a capsize happens, and
Hmm.
reassure them that it's okay, you can right the boat and on you go. So
Right, right,
um, but there are a number of different ideas, looking at underrepresented communities in the sport. So whether it be Able Sail, whether it be Black Nova Scotians, Indigenous groups, those sorts of things. So it's all those that, we're looking and trying to find some of those communities that we can have an impact.
right. So, has there been any foray into indigenous communities that you have in Nova Scotia, and introducing sailing programs for them?
Yeah, I'm going to say about 10, 12 years ago, we spent a couple of years, so a week each year, up in the Indigenous community of Eskasoni, which is in Cape Breton, close to Sydney. And we had great results up there. Great, very engaged community, lots of resources. Went very well. What the downfall was our community champion up there left the community, and there was nobody to take up her wonderful work. So, but we had 2, 3 years of good visits up there for 1 week at a time. And then there's other communities near Pictou First Nation. We're looking at doing some work with them. They're very involved with a boat school here that we're going to become involved with. So, yeah, those communities. But anytime anybody who would like it should certainly reach out and let us know, and we'll make it happen one way or another.
It's good to know, sailing is not, it doesn't have to be as expensive as it looks, right? It's true. There are opportunities. You can get a used laser pico or opti or whatever, throw it in the lake that happens to be in your town or whatever. It's like you say, but you do have to know a little bit about water safety, and like you say, Sophia, it doesn't, it's not like very natural to when you step into a sailboat for the first time. It's not a natural feeling.
You talk, David, about the different boats, that any boat will work, and we found that up in Mabu when we had our program up there, which eventually became a full-time program, which developed Siobhan McDonald, who went to the World Championships and Paralympics for in the 2.4 class. So she came straight from, what's this sailing program at Mabu, to sailing alongside the one and only Paul Tingley at the World Championships here in Halifax, and then in Wisconsin, but also won a couple of medals at Canada Games in the
Hmm.
2.4 class. And then Joanna Pickert as well went from Ketch Harbor Mobile Sailing School to representing Canada at the Youth Worlds. And full circle, she went back to coaching, and she coached the program at Ketch Harbor a couple of years ago. So, but as far as any boats, Danny basically brought a mishmash of boats to complement the opties we had at the time, and off they went. And as you know, there's so many maritimers with boats under their deck. laser twos, picos, cadets, anything and everything, albacores, fireballs, flying juniors, lightnings, everything. And sure, put it in the program. Get out there.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Frank and Sophia, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Not a problem. And thank you again, David, for the honor, for the award. And we look forward to drinking out of the cup or the bowl that we when it's received, and we'll truly display it very proudly.
Excellent. Well, as we tag out here today, sail fast, make friends, have fun. I'll see you on the water.